My boyfriend had to give me the thumbs up.
All right. Hi, my name is Rick Moore, and I'm the publisher of Whitecap Publications. And today I'm interviewing author Tawnya Torres, and she's published two books with us already. Uh, The Heart of the Machine, which is a really fantastic book, and she like The Silent Discovery is the other one, and it's really good too. It's really great. I mean, but I thought today, rather than do pre-formatted interview questions, I'd like to freewheel a little bit and ask you, you've already had two books published with us, right? And can you explain the differences between them? Because they're all different. And I'd like to center on the characters first. In The Silent Discovery, you had Cade, right? And I was fascinated with the differences between the second book. You have the main character being Bellamy. So how do you create all these characters? I mean, honestly, and you've got a third book coming out, The Soulkeeper's Assistant. So it's got entirely different characters. Where do you get all these characters from?
Well, you see, it's a dream come true because now all my maladaptive daydreams now go into something productive.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
so I think when I come up with a concept for a story, so A
Right,
Silent Discovery is a romantic fantasy, and I wanted it to have kind of familiar tropes that people like in romantic fantasies.
right.
So I would say that Cade is more like the aggressive alpha hero that you usually see in fantasy romances.
Oh,
And Amadeus is very shy. She's very smart, but because she can't talk, she doesn't think that she's worthy. She doesn't think that she's very good at anything, and she kind of keeps to herself. So we have that kind
right.
of familiar dynamic of the very shy girl and the very protective man.
Yep.
And then when I was working on The Heart of the Machine, I wanted to do something completely different. And I feel like in most science fiction romances or any romances, it's always like the guy is just chiseled jaw, six pack abs, super perfect. And so that's why I described Bellamy as more like being tall, but kind of frail. He is on the spectrum. He's an autistic character. So I wanted to incorporate how he views the world in like a very different sort of way.
Right,
And so
right,
does Gwen, who is a cyborg, and so she's going to view the world in a very different, almost like unemotional kind of way. So I guess I wanted to pair two characters that don't really have a lot of like maybe emotional
right,
intelligence and see what would happen there.
right. I mean, the differences between Amadeus and Gwen are remarkable too. So in Amadeus, you've got that kind of withdrawn, introverted, because you can't speak at all, right? But honestly, you've got the one case where someone doesn't speak, and you've got the case in a Heart of the Machine where you've got Gwen who can speak bunches, but has to be learning what to say because her emotional intelligence is underdeveloped, but it really advances quickly throughout the story, right?
It does, like she grows exponentially, even like in the first, I think like 3 or 4 chapters, she already starts
Right,
establishing what she likes, what she doesn't like, songs that she likes, art that she likes. She has a hard time with like feelings, like and reading people's like faces. Like she doesn't really like when people make concerned faces or happy faces, she doesn't really get it. She doesn't really read the emotions in
right,
the room. And so
right,
like she
right.
takes everything at face value that people say to her.
Now, who are your main characters in Soulkeeper's Assistant, the upcoming book?
The main characters in that book are Ryan and Mia. When the book starts, Ryan is 15 and Mia is 13. And it's kind of the same a little bit as Cade and Amadeus, where I would say that Mia is very shy and introverted. She gets bullied a lot.
Right,
And Ryan is older than her. This takes place in Japan, and he is a tall white guy. So a lot of people don't mess with him. He's considered popular.
right.
He's really good at sports. So when he and his dad marries her mom, he kind of takes on like the responsibility of like, I should protect her. Like she's my
Okay.
real sister.
Yep, yep. Now, how do you explain the age difference between your characters? Like for example, in the letter case, the Soulkeeper's Assistants, your characters are teenagers, right? At the beginning of the book.
They
And
are teenagers, although I would not say it's a young adult novel. I
Right.
feel like it's very much more like it doesn't have like the young adult themes that you
No, it
normally
doesn't.
see. It's a
It does.
very dark book
It really is,
revolving around young
actually.
people.
It really is. I mean, but um, in the case of Gwen, she's ageless, right? She's born in an egg, right? She comes out fully formed, right?
Yeah, she comes out at age 20 and Bellamy's 34. And so he's like watched her kind of like grow from being like, like a fetus into a
Right.
person. And it's like she's still very much childlike, and so is he because of his isolation, like living in a
So,
secret lab and not having the ability to go outside because of aliens.
how old is Amadeus in your novels?
I had the story start like she's about to be 24, which she says something about like she's going to be 24, which is considered too old to
Right.
be not married.
That's really odd, but yeah. But so you got Mia at one extreme. She's a teenager, right? How old is Mia? Did you say?
Mia starts out at 13 and then she's like 16 at the end of the book.
Right, she morphs into 16 at the end of the book, right? But Amadeus starts at 24 years old. And let's see, Gwen is older, right? She's born at 20 years old.
Yeah, so she ages. I like have it like kind of like the implant in her head kind of keeps her youthful, it keeps her young. But she does grow, like she continues to age, but maybe like not at as fast of a rate as a normal human being.
I'm
Because
not.
that's technology that I think that people are leading towards, like, with like Neuralink and all the things, like if we could
Yeah.
put something in us that kept
Oh
us
yeah,
youthful
yeah.
longer, we
They're
would.
really, they're really expecting that. But this is the first story that I've seen that's really good. It's really good. It bridges the worlds. It's science fiction, and yet it's personal, right? It's a personal romantic story, but it starts out as a science project and then gradually falls in love and he doesn't recognize it. And in Bellamy's case, right? So
Yeah, I
it's
think that he's so, like he wants to prove everyone wrong, that he is a good scientist, that he's not just
right,
some
right.
like airheaded playboy rich scientist son. He's like, I can do this. So
Yep.
he is kind of foolhardy in the sense of like he doesn't even pay attention to the signs of her falling in love with him. And then it's almost like too late, and he's kind of backed in a corner of like, well, she's not going to help me fight the aliens unless I give her what she wants.
Right.
And what she wants is me.
That's the tension that builds up in the story, right?
hmm
Bellamy originally creates her to fight the aliens, but he's falling in love too, right?
And then there's the growing frustration with the other team members in the lab. So like the other woman, Shira, that he works with, thinks that he's just so unprofessional, thinks it's so wrong how he talks to her, and lets her like kind of walk all over him because he's supposed to be training her, and he at a certain point is kind of just letting her do whatever she wants.
Right.
And the male scientists are like, well, we're making all these weapons for her. We're making like all these different things for her to be trying out.
Right.
And
Right.
she's just in her room reading romance novels. And they're kind of upset by her humanity, which is like, but we need the humanity to make her care about the people to make them help, like make her want to help
I
them.
thought
So
that
it's
was
very,
I thought that was a brilliant twist, by the way. They're expecting science and she's in her bedroom reading romance novels. That's a really cool idea.
yeah,
So,
and playing with teddy bears because she's, still very immature emotionally. And I see like the potential in her, but yeah, she's like in a way like kind of going through like her teenage girly phase of wanting to
right,
read romance novels and pick flowers and play with teddy
right.
bears.
How would you differentiate between Amadeus, Gwen, and Mia? You've got three characters created. They're entirely different from one another, but yet they're similar. But what are the differences you'd like to highlight for the audience, right? Between Amadeus, Gwen, and Mia.
So everyone I think has their own personality, obviously. And
Right.
Amadeus, and they all have their own struggles. So Amadeus is mute, but she's very, very smart. She loves to read. And then Gwen, I would say, is like in a way she's almost on the spectrum like Bellamy because she has so much knowledge in certain regards, but very little when it comes to reading emotions of
She's
other people.
almost autistic to begin with, right?
Yeah, like
I
that
mean,
I
honestly, then
would
she
imagine
grows
a
out of it.
typhoid
Yep.
would.
Yeah, then she grows out of it, but in the book, but yeah. And how would you compare Mia to Amadeus and Gwen?
I
I
think
find that
that
really fascinating to compare her.
I think that Mia, she is so young and fragile. Amadeus is also fragile, but I would say that Mia is almost unable to like pull herself out of the darkness. Whereas like Amadeus throughout her story, A Silent Discovery isn't just a romantic fantasy, it's also kind of like a book of self-discovery, like learning
Yes,
to love
yes,
yourself.
I
And
agree.
I think that she had an easier time doing that, whereas Mia's life and the things that happened to her, like her dad dying, and then her mom marries Ryan's dad, who is just not very nice.
Horrible,
All
right?
money. He is not a good person. And so I think that I wouldn't say, I don't want to say she's a weak character, but I would say that she's like the most fragile. Like she has the hardest time pulling herself out of that dark
But
place.
she's younger than the people too, right? Than the other
Yeah,
character.
she's very, very young.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That could be part of her problem, but it's also
I think so.
yeah. So as you follow Mia as she grows and evolves almost into young womanhood, right? She's 16 years old, but I mean, at the end of the novel, right? But
Yeah, and then
she's
they're
almost,
like doing their own thing. So she is like kind of more like her own person and isn't like tied down to being like what everyone thinks that she should be, which I think is her problem like at schools. Everyone thinks that she should be this way and that her long hair is weird and she talks too quietly. Everyone just is always constantly judging everything that she does.
whereas Amadeus is different than her, right? She can't talk at all, right? So
Yeah,
nobody
so there's
decides that
rumors.
she doesn't talk, right? Yeah. And I think that she has an expectation of failure from her mother and from her sisters. Amadeus does, right? And where Ryan is supportive of Mia, right?
Yes, the whole time he is like undoubtedly so supportive,
Right,
and Mia really can't see it for a long time because she just doesn't believe for the longest
right,
time.
right, right, right. And Gwen doesn't need a support structure, but gradually learns to acquire human emotions, doesn't she? I think that's very odd because the scientists that are responsible for monitoring Gwen have one set of expectations for her and one set of expectations only. That's to fight the Indians and to develop some bonding to the people around her, but not too much, right? Not too much. They certainly don't expect her to fall in love, right? They don't
I
with
think that they see her as like a god, like that she should be like their savior and she should like love them.
right. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, like the way that
that's true.
God would love people.
That is true, actually. Yeah, it's really true. And you've got the surprise endings in common, right?
I do like the twist. That is my favorite part, is the
Yep.
twist.
Yep. With Amadeus trying to kill herself at the end, and only then does Cade express himself to her, right? And only then does Amadeus express herself to him, right? When
I know
she
it takes such a tragic event for them to like be honest. And I know sometimes people don't like the miscommunication trope in books. It can be like it can be very exhausting and frustrating, but I thought that this one worked because she really can't talk and he
right,
can't read. So
right.
there's really no way for them to
I
communicate.
thought that was a brilliant stroke, by the way. I mean, honestly, having her not talk and him not being able to read was really quite interesting. It was compelling, in its own way. You got to find you wait through the whole book, A Silent Discovery, by the way. You wait through the whole book for them to resolve the fact that she can't speak and he can't read. It's really, kind of frustrating. As the tension builds up, and then of course, with the catharsis at the last minute, you make everything okay. But honestly, you wouldn't expect it to turn out that way. You're expecting, well, she's going to die or something like that. Like with Gwen, you don't expect in the book Heart of the Machine for her to die, right? But then, there's a twist I won't tell the readers, but and in the Soul Keeper's Assistance, you've got another twist coming, don't you? Right? So that's
That's
good.
always my favorite is the twist. And I don't want to give too much away, but it's like sometimes the
Yep.
bad guy isn't who you think that it might be.
Well, it's really true, honestly. I was amazed at who the bad guy was in Soul Keeper's Assistance. I just kind of, when I read through it, I first kind of ignored him. I thought, what an asshole, but well, it's a character. And in the end, he got into the conflict, right? So I won't tell any more than that, but it's really true that they're. Now, how do you explain the difference in settings? You've got Silent Discovery set in a fantasy setting in castles and kings and everything like that. In the Heart of the Machine, you've got a futuristic setting. They're in a mountain in Japan, right? So they got put that way. And in, let's see, when you do the last book, the Soulkeeper's Assistants, you've got the just setting general Japan, right? In the second book, Heart of the Machine, you don't, everything that you see is set in a mountain, right? It's really great, actually. And in the Soulkeeper's Assistants, you've got the environment of Japan, but not a mountain, right? It's city life exceptionally well, but
Yeah, that one's like modern life. I thought of it just like being
yeah,
like, yeah, like very like contemporary. And then
it
Heart of the
really
Machine,
is,
I was worried I wasn't going to be able to pull it off because
right?
like if it was a movie, if you were watching it as a movie, they're
Yep,
just in the lab. Like there's no
right.
other set and they can't really go outside. Well,
That's
he can
really
go
true.
outside a little bit with Gwen's kind of overlooking things to make sure that they don't die from the aliens.
That's
But
really,
really
really
everything
fascinating.
that he's explaining,
Yep.
it's like he is telling you what he sees and then what he used to see. Like when he was playing baseball and
Yes.
the aliens invaded, or like when he went to the beach with his mom, or when he went to a concert with his mom. But he throughout the book, it's like if it was a movie, all of it would take place in a lab in a mountain, which could be
Real
really
time.
boring to some people, but I wanted it to be very cerebral.
It'd be very compelling. Honestly, it would. And the first book, Silent Discovery, is very compelling too, right? In its own way. It's an entirely different way, right? Now, how
I
did
was really inspired by, and they're not anything alike, but I love Dune. And so I was very inspired by the desert that Cade lives in. I was really inspired
absolutely
by that and kind of like a fantasy version of the Middle East.
right? Oh my gosh, that's exceptional. Now, how does your mind work on these things? I mean, they're entirely different projects. And I realize you may not understand how your mind works. You just go with it. But how do you think you create three such separate, different books, different settings, different characters, and different plots? I mean, how do you come up with all those ideas?
I feel a lot of it is through like emotion itself. So I'll maybe want to capture a certain feeling. And it usually
Right?
starts with like a single, I feel like a lot of writers do this, where there's like a single scene
Right?
that is just so perfect and it has all these beautiful emotions. And you just want to get to that scene, but you have to create a whole story around that specific scene. I think that that's what happens to me. And I'll like kind of initially know that the tone is fantasy, or I'll just kind of intuitively know like, this is
Right?
what the soundtrack would be. This is like what the characters should be like. And I kind of build off there. So it'll start usually as like a scene and kind of like grow out from there.
Oh, I see. I see. But I'll press this point. But you settle on a scene, right? For each book, right? And you say that you evolve from there, right? But still, how do you come up with such different scenes in your mind? I realize you probably don't know, but they just come to you naturally, right? I mean,
I think I did like a lot of EMDR therapy in the past. And if you don't know what that is, it's like
yeah, I
the
do,
eye movement desensitization.
right?
And when you do that, you like hold on to the third tapper or they have something going back and forth. And you get into like this deep meditative state. And
Uh,
I would usually have a lot of like imagery. And so I think that I'm just like very much like an imagery person and like
right.
the feelings that go along with the images. And I don't know, I just kind of like piece them together, or I'll see a piece of art that I really like. So a lot of my art doesn't, it probably doesn't seem like the art that I'm inspired by,
Right.
but A Silent Discovery is, I was really inspired by The Shape of Water, which is a monster and a
Ah,
mute woman. And then I was very inspired by The Time Traveler's Wife when I wrote The Heart of the Machine, which
okay.
if you looked at the two, you'd be like, there's nothing really in common. But I'm like, there is the
Yeah,
underlying science fiction romance though. And
right.
then the Soulkeeper's Assistants. One of my favorite books, movies ever is American Psycho. And I think with that one, I was like, what if American Psycho was a teenager and he was white and he lived in Japan.
You know, your mind works entirely different from my mind. I don't have any images at all in my mind. I've never had any images in my mind. I mean, I can't visualize. When you walk out of a room, if I was in a room with you, if you walk out of that room, I entirely forget what you look like.
Is that like aphantasia where it's like where you can't visualize?
I think it is actually because when you come back into the room, I instantaneously recognize you, but I don't have any object in my mind to compare it to. I just instantaneously recognize you. That's the way I am with everybody, right? But honestly, it's an odd feeling to listen to you explain your process for creating a novel because with images and like a movie, it's really quite unusual to me. I know a number of writers like you that have images in their mind and everything like that, but I don't really know anyone like myself that can't see any images in their head. I think I was
I've
dropped
heard
out.
a couple of writers talk about having like aphantasia and still writing these amazing books. And I don't know, they have some interesting concepts of like
They
how they really
do.
like use like dialogue or just like the feeling that a story
Right,
is supposed to
right.
have. For me, I just feel like I just see so much.
Wow, that's amazing. It's truly amazing. Now, oh, we better conclude today's interview. But your first book is A Silent Discovery by author Tawnya Torres. And the second book is The Heart of the Machine, which is really a great book, by the way. And the third book, which will be coming out in October 1st, right, is The Soulkeeper's Assistant. And buy them and ask for them at your local bookstore and everywhere, right? So,
I want them to be everywhere.
so I'll tell you, let's see. I'll get back to you next week. Can we interview next week?
All
Good,
right, sounds good.
good, good, good. I really liked it. I really enjoyed myself, Tanya. I'll see you later.
All right.
Bye bye.